Hi, it's Susan. Welcome back to my channel. Here is the show and tell of some papers that I have been painting lately. My last two live streams, I was working on these, and what I've been doing is working on using up my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay India Inks. These are a beautiful, highly pigmented permanent ink. They are used often with calligraphy, and I bought two huge sets of them many years ago, like over 10 years ago. Probably watched somebody doing a video and saw them doing some beautiful work and fell into that, mindset that, oh, well, if I have that material, then I'm going to make beautiful things. And of course, I didn't stop to think about it. I didn't do calligraphy, number one. And, I liked playing with it a little bit in my mixed media. And when I stopped doing art journals, it wasn't working for me, and they're sitting on my shelf, and I've been doing this big studio clean out. So I wanted to figure out some other ways to use it. Now, you can't really use it much like an acrylic paint, like, get a paintbrush and just smooth it across. It dries really fast. What I like about it, though, is it is permanent. So then if I want to do more wet media with it, it's okay. It's not going to move the color around like any of the distress sprays, which I love working with, but sometimes you have to be careful with the color moving around. Anyway, so what I decided to do was I needed some papers for some journal projects I'm working on, and I just wanted to try it with some different papers and get some color down. And so I did a lot of dilutions, diluted it with water, and I dropped it on and spread it around. Again, there's two lives on them. One of them I was doing tracing paper, and then the other one I was doing tissue paper. So I just said I would show you how because they go on very dark, and then they dry lighter. So here are, let's see, I wonder how, might do better if I show them individually. That way they're not going to, yeah. So this is tissue paper, and you don't get much soak through. I used both regular tissue paper that had no wax coating, and then some of it that had kind of like a waxy coating on the other side. And this is just, gift wrap paper that I would get. But I love the different veinings. Let's see if I can, yeah. And this is so nice and lightweight that I can collage with it, and it's not going to add a lot of bulk to my journal pages. I can also make, I did bring some little samples over. I can make the little faux glassine bags with it. This one is actually with tracing paper, but I could do it with the tissue paper too. So, and there's just, I'm just really happy with the range of colors. And I still have inks left. I don't have any yellow left, but there's a lot of other things I can make. And this was white tissue paper for the most part. There were a couple of colored tissues. I just got much more tone. Oh shoot, I meant to bring over some of the original color. But I mean, when you have something that's just white, or this one might have been one of the light greens. Yeah, this is one of the light green tissue papers. It was just kind of blah, it was one note. And now you've got the different tones on it. And of course, they all make a really great sound. You could put this in your journal just kind of like as a sneak peek, and then see what's on the other side. You can sew on this. It makes the tissue paper a little bit stronger. This has got some of the little lines from the paper I had it drawing on. And one of the other things I did was, this is 2 sheets of tissue paper. So I don't know if you can hear the difference. And I did not use any glue. This was just 1 sheet of tissue paper and then another sheet on top of it, and it made it stronger and it glued it together. The pages aren't coming apart. And so this could be just a page on its own. Again, this could be a bag. This could be an envelope. And it was just a nice way. A lot of things with tissue paper. You can do that with acrylic paint, watered down acrylic paint, and pile tissue paper on top of one another. And it's going to glue it together. And what I like about that without using glue is you don't have that plasticky feel, which is not one of my favorite things. So now this is on tracing paper. Yeah, tracing paper. And so you get a little more color on the other side. These are just going to be great. I'm just really happy. I got exactly what I wanted. This is actually more green in person, but this is another one where there's 2 sheets of tissue paper, so that's nice and strong. Some blues, some more greens. This is tissue paper. You can just see I wanted something that looked like it was left in the forest, and I totally got that. The holes, it doesn't matter because you can use these for collage. You know, you can, holes in paper, things that you're working on most of the time don't matter. Look at that veining. You could take a fine liner pen and go over this. I might do that with some of these. A black fine liner pen and just kind of trace the lines. That makes a really neat picture. Very earthy colors here. And sometimes the wrinkles stayed, you know, because of course tissue paper gets wet when you, you know, wrinkles when it gets wet. And sometimes it smooths itself out, and I just let it do, you know, I didn't try to do anything. I haven't ironed the tissue paper ones. I did iron the ones that were on tracing paper just because you'll see a different effect. Look at this. This is just exactly what I wanted. So there's gobs. I have gobs, and I still have inks left. Oh, this one looks very much like some of the handmade paper I like to buy, and it is 2 sheets, and there are, in addition to the wrinkles, there are some threads that I just tossed on here, and then a little bits of rosemary. Because this was such a dark color, the inclusions don't really show through like it would on white on white. I think this was using green tissue paper, and then I put green paint or green ink on top of it. So just really, I'm going to have so much fun playing with these. Some of them were just tissue paper scraps, and that's fine. And sometimes you get some neat color that comes through on the other side, and sometimes you don't. This was another one, was tissue paper, and this one I would probably sew or do a little bit of glue around the edges. And the top were these Kim wipes that I use. They're like a technical tissue, so they're pretty lint free, and they're very thin, like a single ply of a napkin, and it just gave that crinkled effect, which was just kind of neat. I can totally picture that as a page in a journal. More greens. This one I tried something a little different. I tore, you know, lots of times we have little scraps, tiny scraps, and so I tore them into smaller scraps and laid them down and did the ink over them to treat it more like glue, and that worked. This one should probably be ironed. And so just kind of, and it's kind of thicker, so it's a little bit stronger. And you can do this obviously with anything that will put color down. You can do this with your liquid watercolors, with your regular watercolors. You can do this with acrylic paint that you water down. You can do this with your sprays. You can do this with gelatos and distress crayons. I have done this with my Neocolors, my watercolor crayons, and you can make shavings and mix them in with water, and you get like watercolor, and you can either spray them or paint them. Okay, so these are on tracing paper, and I did iron these, and I just, gosh, I'm just really thrilled with the effect. They've got such a great sound to them. I mean, you know, sound when we turn the pages in a journal is just really neat. And if you're into shakers, I guess this might work for shakers, but won't that be a pretty page? Some of them have more color on the other side. Sometimes I just left tracing paper down while I did another one on top of it, and whatever happened on the back side I was fine with. This looks like the beach or sunset. So you've got textures from where it wrinkles, and when you iron it, you get some more textures. And this was just cheap, really cheap tracing paper. Me trying to blow it around. You can't do like you would with an alcohol ink where you can drop it and it just spreads, but you get a little bit of a spread if your paper is really wet. So, I mean, I've just got some great color palettes to play with here. All these greens. And again, you know, you can make a little envelope with this. This way you can make a bag. I mean, every time you cut these into a different shape, you're going to highlight a different part of your page. Something kind of moody. The ocean. Gosh, I really like this. some pigments get really thick and blotchy, and like I said, these are really old, which is why I wanted to use them up. And I probably won't buy them again because I have other coloring options to play with. But the things like the white, no matter how much I dilute them, it just gets really blotchy. And that's okay, it just adds another effect. None of these are ruined, none of these are bad. So you didn't get quite as much soak through with the tracing paper, but that's okay. Some of this wanted to stay on top, so it didn't spread very much. I just love the grungy stuff. And I mean, I even took paper that had been, I would leave the paper on a tray and be doing my distress sprays, and you have that kind of overflow, and eventually the stuff, or my tea dyeing and things, just builds up, and it just had all this grunge on it already. And then I put my inks on top of it and just got some really great results as well. So I just kind of went around the studio grabbing up all my, excess paper pieces, and they all got treated to color. And so I've got lots. So this was a leftover scrap of something. That'll make a nice little faux glassine bag. This one's got a great texture. Yeah, so this is the parchment paper that was kind of torn. So I did it on tissue paper, tracing paper, parchment paper. And some of the parchment papers have things on both sides. And it doesn't, parchment paper isn't designed to be painted on, so some of the stuff doesn't stay, and that's kind of part of the charm for me. I can tell this was something I had distress sprays on to start with, and then I just added to it, so I just get that wonderful, wonderful grunge. And just, and I just applied the water on like crazy. And then these last few I have were actually on wax paper. I had some wax paper down to protect something, and I said, well, let me see what happens with the wax paper. And I was really surprised that any of the paint stuck at all. I haven't ironed these. They were just under books for a few days. And it didn't seem to matter whether I painted on the waxy side or the non-waxy side. But that was kind of cool. And then at the end of the day, I had some paint left in my water jar, and the India inks, they dry really, really hard. And so normally when I would save, paper towels or something, if you don't unwrap them right away, they get really stiff, and even then they're not something you want to sew through. But I had some fabric, and I dabbed up the fabric with it, and this is really thick, and this is just cotton sheets that I've torn up. But it's got a great feel, and it almost feels like the cover for a mini journal. I mean, look at that. Isn't that awesome? So I think that might become a mini journal. And then this one didn't get quite as stiff because the ink is in some places. This is a piece of a green sheet. But I do like to use up fabric to sop things up. And then since I had tracing paper out, I did go ahead and play with, I had some really old alcohol inks, and they were starting to kind of be strange. So I did do some of them on tracing paper. So I have really been building up my stash of painty papers. And I'm really anxious to get back to work on making journals. I hadn't tried any of the golds. Marabou Inks has a regular alcohol ink that has the metallic colors, so it acts like an alcohol ink, not like a mixative. Some of this wanted to really split. I just let it, it was just added more texture. I could never have enough browns. I just ordered a whole bunch more alcohol inks. And of course, doing them on the tracing paper, it just, I can see the grains of wood through this, so you get some of that translucency still. So that's what I have today. I have a huge, beautiful stack of papers to play with in my journals, and I am just really, really happy with it all. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye for now.